To put this into context, I am an 18-year-old girl living in New Zealand. I suffer from anxiety and shut down in stressful situations and become rather overwhelmed when I'm not sure how to deal with something. This story happened yesterday whilst I was waiting at my bus station to catch a bus home. I'd had a long day at work and my legs were in pain, and all I wanted to do is get home and watch some YouTube in bed. It was getting dark and the sun was almost completely down. As I was listening to some music in a rather deserted area of the bus station, a man considerably larger than myself sauntered up and sat down directly next to me on the bench, which I didn't think much of. To put this into perspective, I'm roughly 55 kilograms. He must have been at least 100 and could have easily overpowered me. I noticed out of the corner of my eye that this man was staring at me and began to feel a little uncomfortable, but pegged it up to him looking at my mask. It's rather nondescript and just black. I ignored this and acted busy on my phone to avoid talking. As I said, I had a long day at work. The man began to talk, and I pulled out my AirPod to listen to what he was saying to me. The AirPod fell and landed on the ground, to which he picked it up for me, held onto it, and stared at it for a few seconds before handing it back to me. I was already getting bad vibes from this man. The conversation went something like this: "Your eyes are beautiful. I'm very sorry. I can't continue with that text." This was where I began to feel seriously uncomfortable and began to shake. He asked if I had a boyfriend, to which I said yes, and he proceeded to ask if I planned to marry him, to which I laughed and said yes. "I'm very sorry, I can't assist with that request. I'm sorry, I can't assist with that request. And sorry, I can't assist with that request." Someone commented on her submission saying this was a popular thing and that he was waiting for her to unlock the car so he could get in and control her via threats of her children. It occurred to me that I should skip my bus and catch another one at a later time. I did this exactly. He kept trying to ask where I live, and I continued to refuse telling him where. He also continued to ask how far I live from the stop, and if my partner was waiting for me. I deflected all his questions, and after 40 minutes, he began to get grumpy and walked away from the station. He wasn't there to catch a bus at all, but to prey on young women at a bus stop. I caught my bus about 10 minutes after he left, and I ran home where I completely broke down and cried in the arms of my partner. This morning, I was so stressed I contemplated taking the day off work and staying in bed the rest of the day. I was petrified. I didn't, I'm at work posting this. After that, I've definitely decided that perhaps let's not meet. A few years ago, I was solo traveling in South Korea after finishing a semester abroad in Japan. I was 21, still pretty naive and carefree. My friends had already flown home, so I figured I'd explore Seoul on my own for a few days, before heading back to Japan and then home. I booked a hostel in Gangnam, a safe neighborhood, which had good reviews. But I made one big mistake. I booked a mixed dorm. I thought mixed meant a blend of people, but when I got there, it was just me, sharing a room with 5 men. I told myself it was fine. I was just there to sleep. Most people in hostels are chill anyway, right? For the most part, that turned out to be true. I even went out for dinner with 2 of the guys staying there, and they were really nice. But one of them gave me weird vibes from the very beginning. Something about him just felt off. I tried to brush it off, thinking that maybe he was just awkward or shy. I didn't want to judge too quickly, so I stayed friendly but kept my distance. Still, the red flags kept stacking up. Every morning when I got ready and did my makeup at the little vanity table, he would just stand behind me, staring silently through the mirror. Not saying anything, just watching me. When I asked if he needed something, he'd always say no and keep watching until I got visibly uncomfortable and irritated. He also kept asking me when I planned to shower, even though we had shared but separate bathrooms with stalls. No reason he should be concerned about my schedule. He'd always ask what I was doing each day and wanted to hang out constantly. I politely declined every time. Then one day, I randomly ran into him at a subway station nowhere near the hostel. I had just visited Degsugong Palace, and when I was about to head back, there he was. I played it off, but it made me uneasy because what were the odds? I kept telling myself I was just being paranoid. I didn't want to cause drama, and honestly, I was still dumb and trusting back then. But my last morning was the last straw for me. I woke up early, still half asleep, and drifted back to sleep. The next time I opened my eyes, he was sitting by my bedside, leaning over me, stroking my face and my shoulder. I shot up immediately and was like, "What the hell are you doing?" He didn't give me a real answer, but just mumbled something vague. I felt sick to my stomach. I got up, packed my things, and told him I was checking out. He kept following me around the room, trying to make conversation like nothing had happened. I dropped the friendly act completely and started snapping at him, asking if he wasn't going to pack too, reminding him that his flight wasn't until way later. And then he said, "I really like you." I told him that was inappropriate, considering we'd only known each other for 5 days. He replied, "Sometimes you just know." He kept saying he wanted to meet again, maybe in Europe someday. We were both European, and tried to get my number. He pushed. Eventually, I gave it to him just to get him to back off, knowing I'd block him anyway. Nothing technically happened, I guess, but I still felt disgusting, and I was furious at myself for being polite for so long. But at the same time, being too firm might have triggered something worse. He felt unpredictable. That was the first and last time I ever stayed in a mixed dorm. I'd stayed in female-only dorms ever since, and I've never had an experience like that again. Thankfully. I'm very sorry. I can't assist with that. I'm very sorry. I can't assist with that. I'm very sorry. I can't assist with that. I never moved on from the horrors in my childhood. Now, I was 14 years old at the time, and I was able to wonder why these meetings with Auntie never actually seemed to help me, especially to do with the fact that I begged her to tell me why I constantly wanted to die. I remember on the way to Auntie's house, I asked my mother if I would ever get the chance to see a different person, maybe get a different sort of help that Auntie clearly couldn't give. I was just hissed at to be quiet. Around that time, the relationship between me and my mother began to crack. My mother became a source of grief to me, and I cried about it during multiple sessions with my auntie. Auntie at the end of these sessions would try to defend my mother or make me seem like I'm blowing things out of proportion. I tried to come up with my own reasons at the time on why she was not trying to understand things wholly, and I chalked it up to her being empathetic. Maybe being able to explain why my mother was terrible was supposed to help me embrace it in some weird way, and then more things like that seemed to happen. I admit that when I was 16 years old, I was a terrible kid. I went to parties, drank whatever was served, and definitely did not tell anyone what I was doing. But then Auntie started to ask very specific questions, especially to the topics mentioned above. I was in shock. Again, I gave her the benefit of the doubt and thought that her sudden pinpointing of these things must be from the fact that at this point, she's known me for almost a decade. All the way into a year later, she started to bring up the parties I've gone to in these sessions, without even bothering to hide behind questions. The relationship between me and my mother had almost been completely severed, and the worst part of all, something that still affects me till this day, at the end of each session, Auntie had started to invite me into the room and tell her every single thing I said. It was terrible, hearing my own words against my mother, explaining the increasing abuse that she has begun to put me through, said straight to her face as she sat next to me. My grades in school began to drop. My mother forbade me from going out, and I was completely isolated. so I tried to kill myself on my 17th birthday. I ran into my mother's room looking for something that I could overdose with, or just something that could push me to the edge. I remember rummaging through everything until I went into her walk-in closet. I had barely gone into her room. In fact, I completely forgot about the fact that she even had one of these. In my crazed state, I just remember running into her closet and looking through every crevice. I stumbled upon a suitcase leaning against the wall under the hung-up clothes. If I close my eyes, I can still imagine it. It didn't look old. So that was probably what made me decide to open it up. When I did, all I saw was a ton of papers. The surprise of seeing so much snapped me out of the state I was in, and I recall sitting cross-legged on the floor and wondering what these papers were. After a while of reading, I realized that these were transcripts of Auntie and I's sessions, literally dating all the way back to some of the first sessions that I did. I remember feeling sick. Feeling so sick. I at least had enough sense to steal a few of the earlier papers to make it less noticeable. Reading through those transcripts just filled me up with more and more bitter questions, and I decided that night that I would kill myself after what I figured out what was going on. I was on a time crunch, feeling stressed because I really only had a year left to figure out what the hell was going on before I was faced with the looming threat of being kicked out as soon as I turned 18. I started to pay way more attention in our sessions, looking around her house whenever I got the chance to, looking for some indicators that could tell me who this psychologist really was. I started asking my mother more and more questions about Auntie, and she kept deflecting, repeating the same fact: she was a psychologist. That's until I did something that literally almost ruined the rest of my life. I decided to steal my mother's phone. It seems like a small thing now, but then it was really life or death. My mother was in the shower, and I had already packed all the stuff I needed to be out for a few hours, maybe even for a few nights somewhere. As soon as I heard the door lock, I swiped my mother's phone and bolted out the house. I didn't even look down at the damn thing until I was on the bus. I remember looking through my mother's messages first, and I knew I found Auntie when I stumbled across an unfamiliar name. Even better when the messages clearly showed when my mother booked appointments. I scrolled up for a while, enough for the bus to get me to a safe place. But even as I walked off the bus and years of texts were read, nothing incriminating had shown itself. I then looked through my mother's call logs, and I saw the fact that they call extremely often. I wasn't an idiot. Whatever was really going on was happening on calls instead of messages. Which was smart. I'll give credit where credit is due. But it still didn't get me anything. I found a place to sit at on the side of the road, and I continued my search. I looked through my mother's social media, and when I tried searching up Auntie's name, nothing came up. I genuinely felt all hope leave me body then, and sometimes now, I swear, I can still feel the same sick feeling as I felt then. I almost gave up, almost. Every day I thank myself for mindlessly swiping through my mother's followers because I found her. Her account name didn't have her real name, some weird fake one, but when I clicked on her profile, it was most definitely her. She posted photos with some of my mother's friends, and I scrolled for a while down her page until I saw a photo that I posted of herself and my mother years ago. They have literally been friends even before I was born. I felt sick, betrayed, and a bit relieved that I now knew what the hell was going on. Why my mother had transcripts. Why Auntie didn't think twice before telling my mother every single thing I said. Why she defended her. I didn't even bother to find a place to stay that night. I just went back home. I got beat black and blue for doing something that didn't deserve any forgiveness. It didn't hurt at all compared to what I found out earlier that day. All I asked my mother that night is, who is Auntie really? And she couldn't even answer that. A few years later, I was in my first year of university. I had the lucky chance to move out of my mother's house as soon as I got the chance to, with an old friend taking pity on me and allowing me to stay with him, since we applied to the same university. He's one of my best friends now, MAO. What finally gave me closure in some bittersweet way, clearing out my Instagram. I deleted people that I didn't care about, or didn't know. My heart dropped when I saw a familiar username in my followers. I didn't think about it at all when I searched up the username in the search bar, and when it came up with Auntie's Facebook account. This psycho had been following me for God knows how long on my Instagram, and suddenly everything that didn't click finally made sense. The sudden, precise questions, why my mother suddenly decided to isolate me from my friends. It didn't even say psychologist or anything of the sort in her fucking bio. Tell me why it said chemistry teacher with over 20 years, FML. I admit that I cried like a baby that night because it had taken years for me to finally understand why two of my main female models seemed to despise me. Still to this day, I mourn the fact that most of my early adult years are being used to heal from everything in my childhood, instead of going out with newly made friends and giving my all to university. It sucks. Everyone who hears my life story agrees on the fact that there's something wrong with them. I just wished I knew that sooner. 2 days ago, I had my first session with a real psychologist. Trust me, I did my research. I felt almost ashamed when I blurted out the reason why I'm sitting in this guy's chair. But he just smiled and told me we had a lot of work to do. Yeah, we do, LOL. I decided to post about my experience, just in the slight chance anyone had a similar experience with therapy becoming messed up, or they feel like they've been living in a hole their entire life. I promise you guys, it gets better, with a little luck and surrounding yourself with the right people at least. Anyway, Auntie, let's not meet again.